Happy birthday, America! To celebrate the semi-quincentennial of our great nation, I decided to binge watch movies all about the good old US of A, many of which are shot entirely on location, outside of the US of A. Welcome to the AmericaFest podcast. I am Jeff, your host and arbiter of Americana, and this is AmericaFest. There are a lot of ways to interpret AmericaFest. I could have gone with patriotic films like Born on the 4th of July, or Patriot Games, or The Patriot, but I didn't. I could have focused on the Revolutionary War, things like Hamilton or Revolution or The Patriot, but I didn't. Instead, I ran with the most obvious, stupid, and spurious possible link between movies, films with America in the title. So join me as I take a look at some of the films brave enough to label themselves with the Stars and Stripes, and maybe learn something about what this country is really about in the process. I'm going to treat these movies in a couple different ways this time. I've noticed that my episode length has been creeping up as I get into detailed plot recaps, which I do when the plot's unhinged or the movie's unknown or unwatchable. I'll be doing breakdowns on about half of these movies today, but just highlights for some others. Keep an ear out for the difference in style, and let me know what you prefer. It might even matter. I started with The Prestige pick, a movie I'd never actually watched before, despite 5 Oscar nominations and pedigree. Honestly, I wasn't missing much. American Graffiti, released in 1973, written and directed by George Lucas before he became a master of cinema, and long before he became a master of destroying his own legacy in cinema. Looking at you, Jar Jar. Graffiti stars Richard Dreyfuss and another future star director, Ronnie Howard, following them on their last night before leaving Modesto for college in 1962. It's pretty similar to Dazed and Confused, but with nostalgia for the early 60s rather than the mid-70s. Kurt, played by Dreyfuss 2 years before Jaws, but already a decade into his career, is apparently the talk of the town. The Moose Lodge is giving him a scholarship, everyone knows him, and is really proud to see him head back east to go to school. Hold up, hard stop. When you're from California, wouldn't this just be east? How do you go back east if you're not from... You know what? Never mind. I'm not going to lose myself in the nonsense colloquialisms of decades ago West Coasters. Anyhow, Hooper's having second thoughts about this whole college thing the night before he's supposed to head out. I'd assume by this point he's paid and registered and shipped his things. It seems like a weird time to pivot out. But he's got some imposter syndrome tickling his brain, and he's thinking about delaying for a year and sticking around town. His pal Steve, Clint Howard's brother Ron, is so eager to go that he gives his car away to his nerdy pal, who lets people call him Terry the Toad, and that tells you all you need to know. And spends about half the movie trying to break up with his girlfriend, who's Kurt's sister, because small towns, I guess. We've got some other characters around town. Young Harrison Ford disproves that old story about how he was a lowly carpenter before landing the Han Solo gig by appearing here as the heel. He rolls around town trying to find the local drag racing champ to challenge him. Cindy Williams, television's Shirley, is Lori, Kurt's sister / Steve's steady. Paul Lamont is the drag champ, considered a punk by the olds and a bad boy idol by the kids. He mostly tools around in his yellow hot rod, looking awfully Jeff Fahey. Lamont would go on to be the entirely forgettable lead in Puppet Master. The Toad is played by perpetually nerdy that guy Charles Martin Smith. Most folks would recognize him as the accountant who turns rat in The Untouchables. As for plot, there's not much. Mostly kids drive up and down the street shouting at each other from their car windows, or go to the drive-in diner and shout at each other from their car windows. Everyone seems eager to leave their cars wherever and hop in with someone else. None of this seems logical or wise to me, especially in a pre-cell phone Uber society. It seems like a great way to have your ride stolen and end up walking home from 3 towns away. The movie hits its weirdest peak when, after fighting with Opie, Shirley ditches her car and hops in with Indy. As they cruise, he starts to croon Some Enchanted Evening at her, and she recoils into the seat like a cat being threatened with a bath. This is baffling because, well, for starters, I didn't know Ford could sing. But also, he's Han goddamn Solo, shirt open like he's just escaped a T-Rex attack. You'd think she'd be into it. This movie's basically a nostalgia delivery mechanism for an era I did not experience, and as such, it flatly misses its mark with me. I don't have fond memories of Wolfman Jack, or grabbing a burger at the drive-in, or going to the Hop, or spending countless hours driving up and down the same street. I had video games and the internet, and obviously a lot of movies. Honestly, the best part of this movie for me was checking out all the cool old cars. They are, as the kids would have said, cherry. Regardless of my take, this movie was a huge hit. Produced for under $800,000, it brought in $115 million domestic and was the 3rd highest grossing release in 1973 behind The Exorcist and The Sting. I've got to chalk this up to being a movie of and for a very specific time. The show ends with little where are they now blurbs about some of our leads. Kurt went to school and became a writer in Canada. Steve never leaves California and becomes an insurance salesman. Lamont gets killed by a drunk driver. Terry the Toad gets killed in Nam. So basically, all the American outcomes. Killed by drugs, die for your country, sell out your dreams to be a cog in the machine, or move to Canada. Speaking of drugs, dying and selling out, next up was Air America. Released in 1990 and directed by George Spottiswoode, which I was convinced was a blame-dodging alias until a credit search informed me he directed Turner and Hooch, 48 Hours, and the Sixth Day, that weird cloning panic movie with Arnold. All right, well, that explains a bit. Air America is a buddy comedy about a free-spirited pilot, played by Robert Downey Jr., joining a secret humanitarian aid air corps in Laos. No, wait. Air America is a biting black comedy starring Mel Gibson as leader of a pack of freelance pilots conscripted by the CIA to smuggle drugs during the Vietnam War. Wait, hold on. Air America is a depressing drama featuring Nancy Travis about the lack of accountability in government and military leadership, abuse of power, and the lack of value placed on human lives in pursuit of money and power. Or, shit, somehow it's all three of these? No wonder no one liked this. Let's lay this one out a bit. RDJ is a chopper pilot doing traffic reports for a local radio station who decides to get up close and personal with a truck driver while doing his broadcast one day. Really keeping it Brockmire. After he gets fired, because even without social media, getting into an expletive-laced shouting match on air with a dickhead gawking at an accident from his semi is going to have consequences, he gets recruited to join a secret program in Laos where he's told he'll be flying logistics support for natives, airdropping supplies. Mad Max is one of the current pilots. He's been in Laos a while and knows the scene and the locals. He's respected by the crew, doesn't respect the military leadership, and runs his own arms-dealing side hustle in between runs dropping bags of rice and parachuting pigs into the homes of villagers on the ground. The rest of the cast is a grab bag of recognizable guys. The big boss is Ken Jenkins, best known as Dr. Kelso in Scrubs. He's doing some real Kelso work here, two-faced and angry, glad hands the politicians who visit while berating them to his underling, a moronic intelligence officer played by David Marshall Grant. Grant has 51 listed credits, including, ironically, People I Know, but I can't place him in anything. Apparently he was in Forever Young, another weird Mel Gibson flick. Nancy Travis shows up 2 or 3 times as a social worker trying to help out the locals, but really she's around as a MacGuffin to add some last-minute conflict into a movie without any real through line. The pilots get shot down a lot. The CIA is smuggling opium for local warlord who dreams of owning a mid-tier franchise hotel on the California coast, probably right down the road from Ron Howard's insurance agency. Senators roaming around trying to find dirt on the smuggling ring. None of it matters much. The movie is largely airplane porn. Big and small era-appropriate planes and helicopters flying over Southeast Asian wilderness. Lots of shots of pigs in crates being parachuted. A couple of spectacular crashes. The shots without actors could be strung together into a nice bit for Chive TV or something. When they do bother to put in scenes with dialogue, the tone is all over the place. There's a mild attempt to set up a buddy comedy with Tony Stark and Martin Riggs, but Downey spends half the movie crashing planes with various co-pilots, while Payback is ferrying around the politician and the warlord. There's a habit of wildly misusing musical cues going on here. The planes are crashing, or the pilots are running for their lives, or they successfully sell guns to farmers, and the music in the background is some big heroic victory score. A couple of strung-out drunks crash landing a plane in 3 pieces probably shouldn't be backed by the Avengers theme. Eventually, Kelso and... I can't even find a good alias for this guy. Brent Hauser from that one episode of Numbers decide to frame Sherlock Holmes and one of the other generic aviators for smuggling in an extremely obvious fashion. Spotting the frame up, he diverts his plane to the site of one of his previous 3 crashes and crashes again, then calls Braveheart in to help him out of the jungle. William Wallace is in the middle of executing his own exit strategy at the time, selling off his stockpile of illicit arms to the locals to build up a nest egg, and brings his plane full of guns to collect his pals. On their way out of the area, they get called on to help out Nancy Travis. Apparently, when she's not taking care of her axe-murdering sister or dragging psychics to haunted houses, she's hanging out with Laotian villages that are being attacked by the VK or local warlords, or both. It's not clear. Anyhow, she's trying to evacuate people and forces Maverick to unload his retirement plan of weapons to take 3 dozen refugees to nowhere, where they can continue being impoverished peasants under another local warlord. This plan is real dumb. These people would have ended up in the same situation if they'd stayed on the ground, and Mel wouldn't have supplied the invaders with a fresh set of Bang Bang. Probably could have helped a lot more people with the money he earned from selling the guns, or by selling the guns to the villagers. Whatever. The last shot is our pair of pilots talking about how they're going to sell the now stolen C-130 to make up the loss. May as well end on a freeze frame. Lame. The movie wraps with a set of end cards, like American Graffiti did, but much more depressing. The evil CIA major gets indicted during the Iran-Contra hearings, is pardoned, and promoted. The evil drug-running warlord gets himself a Holiday Inn. Our heroes end up in Thailand, living in obscurity until they rig the national lottery there. What a lighthearted buddy comedy. The failure to pick a lane here was noticed by the 8 people who actually went to see this movie. On an estimated $35 million budget, it brought in 32, which means a hefty loss when you factor in marketing budget. It actually has a lot of similarities with the previous Fest feature, Volunteers. Both films feature big-name actors and successful directors. Both are about U.S. military malfeasance in Southeast Asia during Vietnam. Both flopped and then vanished from the greater cultural memory. I'm starting to wonder if the CIA isn't secretly manipulating the minds of Americans to erase certain inconvenient films from memory. Or maybe it's because both movies suck. Okay, so I'm 2 movies into the binge, and I've gotten 0 compelling plots. The message about America so far is that we don't really have a sense of direction, money is more important than ethics, and maybe Roy Neary had the right idea sneaking off to Maple Leaf Country. But America has to be better than this, right? Maybe my next flick can save me. What have I got here? Ah, hell. American Ninja, 1985. Canon Films, Golan Globus, Sam Furstenberg. If you're a fan of movies of questionable quality and limited budget, these are names that spark recognition. If you've got a more refined movie palette or are sane, then you probably won't know that Canon is responsible for about 200 bargain bin action movies between 1979 and 1989. Furstenberg is the genius behind such classics as Cyborg Cop and Breakin' 2 Electric Boogaloo and Cyborg Cop 2. He also made a bunch of ninja movies. This being one of those didn't give me a lot of hope that the day was getting better. But I was more mistaken than RDJ's agent when he suggested doing a movie with Mel Gibson would be a boost to his career. American Ninja is fun. It's almost non-stop, stupid ninja action madness. We've got a generic movie setup, but it's the cleanest plot so far. Hijinks are afoot on an island in the Philippines. An American military base keeps losing trucks full of supplies to mysterious hijackers, but no one in command seems to care much. A new recruit shows up and ninjas his way into the affair, revealing a plot that goes all the way to the top of the ranks. Michael Dudikoff, an action superstar with major roles like Conscript Number 2 in Tron and uncredited role in Air America, stars as Joe Armstrong, a troubled amnesiac loner with a history of violence who was driven into the armed forces after getting into one fight too many. He's been shipped off to the Philippines to serve at Fort Sonora, an odd name for a U.S. supply base outside of Manila. We're introduced to him sulking next to a transport truck, playing with a switchblade while his squad mates play hacky sack. Alright, I get it. Hacky sack sucks. But a first impression's a lasting one, and moping on the sidelines and admiring your knives is a bad way to start with a new team. The other soldiers make fun of him a bit, rightly so. Don't be that guy. Put the knife away, Eeyore. The whole group departs as a convoy, taking a bunch of unidentified boxes on a ride around town, I guess. And along the way, they fall into the most obvious ambush ever and are immediately overwhelmed and disarmed, held at gunpoint while the attackers move to steal their trucks. Oh, and for some reason, the colonel's daughter is riding with the convoy because the best way to move civilians around town is surround them with valuable cargo. The enemies notice there's a lady in the mix and start to move in on her, and Joe leaps into action. None of the other soldiers do shit up to this point. A fight breaks out, and just as the army guys are getting the upper hand, goddamn ninjas come leaping out of the jungle and cut them all down while jumping over bullets and posing like the goddamn Power Rangers. Their leader hangs out on an overlooking cliffside with what looks like a cancerous mole on his face that is actually his identifying mark. He's the Black Star Ninja. Okay, I guess. While the fight's going on, the army brat hops into her car and tries to drive away, but immediately veers off the road into a ditch. Private Panic at the Disco goes to help her out, and they are immediately pursued by ninjas, who he fights off while she whines nonstop about how her clothes are ruined. Lady, you are being hunted by actual fucking ninjas here. Maybe couture is not the top priority. She acts totally oblivious to the life-threatening danger, which seems to track with how the higher-ups treat the whole affair. Upon getting back to base, American Ninja is threatened with court-martial for stopping a hijacking because nothing in the convoy was worth dying for. This is delivered by the colonel, whose daughter was part of the event. No one seems to give a shit, and Private Pouty is blamed by the whole base for the deaths of the soldiers in his squad. This seems like extremely misplaced animosity. He rescued the girl and killed half the bad guys, but somehow he's the asshole? The army really sucks at attribution, I guess. Ostracized from his fellow troops, Ninja Boy goes on about his duties, not really caring. He can always talk to his switchblade, I guess. Until Steve James shows up and picks a fight with him. Steve James is basically Black Michael Dudikoff, a tall, muscular guy who is actually listed as Black Martial Artist in Enter the Game of Death, starring Bruce Lee? Not Game of Death, not Enter the Dragon. This is a discount Bruce Lee doing an Asylum style knockoff in the 70s. Wow. Anyhow, James mostly spent his career doing canon action movies, just like Dudikoff. The two fight. Joe keeps hip tossing the larger man until finally Jackson gives up and tells everyone that actually, this new guy's cool. Suddenly, everyone forgets they hate him for getting their pals unalived and help him go on a date with the boss's daughter. Huh? Who cares? Keep moving. There are more fights to have. American Ninja and Patricia, played by Judy Aronson, who played Body Count number 6 in Friday the 13th 4, go to a restaurant in town and sit in novelty chairs that make them look like children. And he notices that Sergeant Shitpants, his CO from the base, who is constantly shoving him under the bus, is having a meal with a sketchy looking business guy. Patty tells him, that's just Uncle Escobar. He runs the drugs, guns, and contraband plantation on the other side of the island. He's harmless. All right, so maybe that's not the exact phrasing, but it explains all the lack of concern by the base commanders. Obviously, they're in on the thefts and are working with the oddly Latino business gangster to steal and sell U.S. Army property. Well, obvious if you're not an amnesiac ninja loner, I guess, because Joe keeps trying to report this up the chain that is clearly involved. Oh, the amnesia thing. It's mentioned in the start that he has no place of birth and no memories before he was like 10. At some point, he encounters a gardener on the island who acts like he knows him and explains he'll understand in time. Turns out this gardener is actually a master ninja. He's stalking his nemesis, the Black Star Ninja, and explains to Joe that he found him as a baby and taught him to ninja, just in case 30 years later they'd wind up on the same island in the Pacific and have to face off against an evil ninja. Also, he can do ninja magic. This is all presented in about a minute or two of dialogue and flashback, and then we have the big final action set piece. Patricia's been kidnapped. American Ninja and his dad sensei sneak onto Uncle Escobar's plantation in the middle of the day, because that's famously when ninjas are most effective. The plan is to mount a rescue and kill the bad guys. At some point, the army shows up, because the colonel decided his daughter was worth rescuing and his business deal had blown up. And we get a wild 20-minute battle with ninjas and machine guns and rocket launchers and kitty cat claws and ninja laser fists and just everything. It's real dumb. It's real fun. American Ninja is a movie. No, I mean it. It's got all the things that a movie should have. It's got a script. It's shot on location with a bunch of extras, making scenes look full and busy. It's got real stunts done by actual people and not green screen CGI nonsense. It's got effort. It's got a clean, easy to follow plot, which is more than I can say for the previous two flicks. It pulled in $10 million on a $1 million budget and had 3 sequels, one of which is a weird, wonderful ninja ghost possesses a fitness instructor entry. What does this tell us about America? Well, so far we have 3 movies from 3 different decades, all of them referencing Vietnam, the US military, and the incompetence of authority figures. And the idea that winning a fistfight is a redeeming act. So we're hung up on Nam, we dislike the man, and we respect violence more than words. That kind of tracks, even if it's not flattering. Maybe it's just my movie choices here. Maybe I should try to find something that's a bit more American spirit to it. Something with a character that really embodies the values and principles of our nation. Someone we can be proud of. How about Captain America? Steve Rogers, sick kid turned super soldier, fighting for truth, justice, and the American way. Can't go wrong there, right? Wait, this is the Albert Pune version from 1990. The same Albert Pune who fractured my brain with Arcade last month? Fucking... Fine. Let's see what this is like. Produced by Menachem Golem of the earlier Golan and Globus duo, this straight-to-video disaster stars J.D. Salinger's 30-year-old son Matt Salinger as eager recruit Steve Rogers, whose crippling polio causes him to limp around a little bit. But I'm getting ahead of myself. This isn't the MCU, so let's start at the beginning. Italy, 1936. A little boy is playing piano for his family when suddenly Nazis kick in the window like it's Kristallnacht and force him to watch as they gun down his whole bloodline. They drag him to a lab where an Italian lady scientist is forced to use her research to turn him into Inside Out Boy. Cut to black. 7 years later, a lively bunch of Americans are throwing a going-away party for son of Catcher in the Rye. He says goodbye to his parents, he has some moments with his friends, he has a moment with his lady friend. That polio really doesn't seem to be holding him back much. And then he heads to another lab to get the updated super soldier treatment for the same Italian lady who'd been forced to experiment for the Reich. He goes into the machine, a normal-looking guy, and comes out a normal-looking guy. This is not the stunning Chris Evans transformation. Before he even has a moment to stumble around like Bambi, A Nazi spy plugs the scientist lady, puts a few rounds in our hero, and gets himself whacked. Luckily, the doctor left behind a rubber suit and a fancy red, white, and blue shield, so Cap is all ready to go. He gets out of a hospital. A day later, he's out of the hospital. 3 bullets? No problem. The army immediately sticks him on a plane to stop a German rocket plan and airdrop him into enemy lines, where he gets his ass kicked by a 19-year-old Red Skull, is strapped to a rocket, and is launched towards Washington, D.C. A real successful first mission. While Cap Missile is heading towards the eastern seaboard, a little boy is talking to his mother about how he wants to be president when he grows up. His mother's sure to use his full name, Thomas Kimball, so we'll remember it in 2 scenes. The boy looks out his window and sees something strange in the sky. He snaps a very clear picture of Captain America's face, despite the man being on an ICBM, and somehow Cap notices the kid and figures maybe he shouldn't let himself get blown up in the nation's capital. He kicks something and the rocket diverts, crashing in Alaska and not exploding. If all it was going to do was crash into a building, he probably didn't need to interfere. Whatever, now he's frozen in ice. We get a newspaper headline time-lapse of 50 years, showing that despite our lack of super soldier, the Allies still win World War II, and a man named Thomas Kimball climbs through the political ranks to become president. Now that it's 1993, the science crew from The Thing locate Ice Cap in the Great North, and he thaws out instantly and just books it out of the room after shouting Nazis. He's in the middle of nowhere, no directions, or supplies, or goal, but he's running anyhow. A now nearly 70-year-old villain, Il Skull Rosso, went from being a Nazi stooge to an Italian mobster. He still has a face like a baboon's ass, though. He sees an article about the mysterious man found in Alaska and decides, without any reasoning, that Captain America is back to stop him. 50 years frozen, remember. Cap has no idea what he's up to. But still, he sends his daughter, somehow Red Skull procreated despite looking like the inside of a butthole, and some goons to kill the guy who is so small a threat that he not only lost their only encounter, but spent the next half a century in hiding as far as he knows. Seems like he could have just left well enough alone. It's worth mentioning that despite being an Italian child raised by Germans, this guy sounds like he's doing a Dracula impression through the whole movie. So Italy plus Germany equals Transylvania, I guess. That's just math, people. President Kimball had a best friend as a kid. And while he grew up to be commander-in-chief, his pal became a famous journalist played by Ned Beatty. When the story about Encino Man broke, President sends journalist guy out to find him, rather than, say, half the armed forces. Trained CIA team. It's not like the president has any other resources to call on to secure a top-secret national defense asset they've suddenly rediscovered. If you find a stray bomb in the field, you call your friend with a pickup, right? Because this movie's script was written in crayon by a 6-year-old on a kid's menu at Denny's, Captain Aneptica is somehow instantly tracked down by Count Regula's goons. Alaska and Canada are famously small. It's honestly no big deal to find a man who hasn't been spotted in probably 2 weeks since he left a glacier on foot. At least Steve figured out which way was south. Conveniently, while fleeing the mafia like a true hero, Captain Crunch stumbles right into Ned Beatty. I mean it, guys. Canada. Smaller than Rhode Island. Lotso tries to explain the wins, wheres, what have you to Stevie Boy, who is having a hard time believing that he's not surrounded by Nazis. After a few minutes, our hero says he's going to be carsick and asks his elderly savior to pull over. When the reporter comes out of the car to check on him, the first Avenger books it back and steals the car, leaving his rescuer on the side of the road in the middle of Canada. True blue hero. Major Malfunction makes his way down south by stowing into a semi-trailer and ends up in Venice Beach, California. He's running around in a flasher's trench coat, holding a conveniently shield-shaped duffel bag, and looks like an absolute jackass, gawking at all the modernity and butts. He does some staring at butts. He makes his way to his old Flames place and sees a blonde lady pulls up with groceries. Since he's been gone, he apparently forgot what his girlfriend looked like and that she'd be fucking 70 by now, and moves to embrace this stranger, and the 90-pound girl knocks him on his ass with a 6er of beer. Let's pause now for a brief recap of this captain's heroic efforts so far. He watched his doctor get murdered, got shot a bunch of times, got airdropped into Germany and lost a fight to his target, got strapped to a rocket that should have blown up both him and the US Capitol, got frozen, ran from the mob, stole a car from someone who was trying to help him while feigning car sickness, he does this again later, violated international borders twice, and got beaten up by a girl. I want to take a moment now to talk about a little bit of biological logistics. Almost all of the above happened while the man was wearing his suit, a horrible-looking rubber number that looks like some discount fetish shop merch, with an attached rubber helmet that has wings, and goddamn rubber ears. How is Cap supposed to hear anything when his rubber hood covers the sides of his head? Well, we put rubber ears on, so it's fine. So fucking stupid. But back to the point. This man has now spent more than 50 years, multiple combat situations, and weeks of road time in this oversized one piece rubber jockstrap. His odor has to be absolutely lethal, is my point. Like, Mark Watney escaping Mars is a bouquet of flowers in comparison bad. And this is the state he was in when he went for his big romantic reunion. So, General Disarray here rediscovers his lost love, who eventually had halfway moved on from him and had a family, but made them stay in the same house just in case he ever came back. That's gotta sting a bit for the husband. A 50-year cucking waiting to happen. The girl who turned Miller time into clobbering time was her daughter. They spend a few boring minutes playing catch up, and then Steve goes to another location with the daughter, Sharon. While he's doing the cliche catch up on history by watching TV bit, La Cosa Rosa shows up at the old lady's place and tortures her for the location of Captain Caveman. Information they clearly don't need if they can locate him in the middle of the Canadian wilderness, but they kill her anyway. Now, Lieutenant Lemass is pissed, and he and Sharon book a flight to Italy. See, somewhere along the way, he learned that Count Regula runs an international criminal organization, one that's responsible for the deaths of JFK, RFK, and MLK, and decides the best course of action is to figure out his real name? Whatever. While he's being completely ineffective, President Kimball is abducted during his trip to Rome. See, his top general doesn't like the new climate policies he's pushing and is working with the Red Skull to put a chip in his brain so he can control the country for a maximum of probably 5 or 6 years at this point. He's not President-elect Kimball, and we have term limits. This B-plot is stupid, is my point. It's worth pointing out that the president is played by Ronnie Cox, Dick Jones from RoboCop, Cohagen from Total Recall, a solid actor who's usually playing a villain. His prior roles really make him hard to accept as the benevolent president who's going to save the world from global warming. Anyways, it all concludes at a beautiful seaside castle somewhere in Italy, where Red Skull is going to blow up all of Europe with an atomic bomb until Cap's new lady friend, daughter of old lady friend, plays a recording of the night his family was killed. While he's distracted by PTSD, our heroic super soldier throws his shield at the villain and sends his mannequin tumbling over a cliff. The bomb is never disarmed or mentioned again, and we all live happily ever after. What the fuck? This movie is all the bad. The costume is terrible, the plot's a mess, the action is terrible. I didn't even get into the Taken Style 3 edit during a foot chase. The character is unlikable. It sucks. It really took the American Ninja wind out of my sails. Cap here is 100% America. Created using science developed by a foreign defector, deployed immediately with more effort on branding than training, overconfident in his superiority despite all evidence of his incompetence. He's basically an Apple product, form over function. Might explain why everyone seems to know where he is at all times. His shield's probably air-tagged. The credits end with a hollow call to please support the Environmental Protection Act of 1990, which is amusing for a few reasons. First, climate change is only mentioned maybe twice. Second, it didn't release in the US until 1992. It had a short theater run in the UK in 1990, which seems like the perfect market for Captain Britannica. So, we can add ineffective, cowardly superheroes to the list of accolades here. These movies aren't painting the picture of Americana I was hoping for. Maybe we should move the target. Captain America was about a volunteer military experiment and left me confused and angry with nightmare fuel from the horrifying freeze frame of Matt Salinger's giant head and rubber ears. Maybe we should look at war crimes instead. Next up, American Ultra, a 2015 action comedy about a stoner burnout who is actually the victim of a government mind control experiment to make him into a super spy. Basically, a cross between Dante from Clerks and Jason Bourne. Given how dark our hero attempts go, this ought to be real uplifting. Jesse Eisenberg is Mike Howell. He lives in a small town in West Virginia with his girlfriend, Kristen Stewart, and his crippling anxiety. Attempts to leave town drive him into fits of vomit-inducing panic, and he's trapped in a tiny town working a convenience store and buying drugs from John Leguizamo, who is, as usual, playing a spastic psycho, but is out-manicked by several members of the cast. It's a weird movie when the violator isn't the craziest guy in the room. For reasons unknown, CIA dickbag Topher Grace decides to order his termination, and the agent who ran his training, Connie Britton, goes to trigger him before the bad guys can whack him. This leads to a good hour of action hijinks as a baffled Lex Luthor fights off attacks from Eric Foreman's less capable brainwashed killers. While Salinger's Rogers was bloated with confident ineptitude, Zombieland is oblivious to his competence. He catches grenades and hurls them back at his attackers while looking confused at what his body's doing. He wins fistfights with trained killers while anxiously muttering about how sorry he is. We've got stand-up performances from Zuck as our unexpectedly charming super agent, Bella in a role that made me reconsider her Dakota Johnson tier acting ranking. Dakota Johnson sucks. Turns out K-Stu can actually deliver a convincing performance. Coach's wife is the CIA agent with ethics. The amazing Walton Goggins, who plays the unhinged enemy assassin Laffer, with a surprisingly effective emotional beat in the finale. And also strong supporting appearances by Buster Bluth, The Pest, and surprise President Whitmore. I'm not going to talk through the whole plot here because I think this one's worth watching, and not enough folks saw it. It cost $28 million to make and brought in less than 27 during its theatrical release, quietly forgotten in a glut of action movies from the mid-teens, rather unfairly, I think. The leads are likable, the action's sharp. There's a long cut fight in a Walmart that is a perfect counterpoint to the failures of Pune. The stunts are solid, and the makeup work is top notch. By the end of the flick, Eisenberg looks worse than Red Skull from the last movie, just convincingly beat to shit. Also, unlike Air America, the villains actually get what's coming to them in this one. Maybe there is accountability in this country after all. Hold on, I just got a news alert. Never mind. All right. Watching a movie about government programs turning some of our most vulnerable citizens into badass secret agents actually did pick up my mood. So I'm going to lean in. What else do we do that's messed up? Well, we try to police the whole world. Maybe someone made a movie about that. Maybe they used marionettes. Maybe it's a musical. Fuck yeah, I watched Team America, World Police. A quick lesson for the alphas, and maybe the boomers who missed it. From the mid-90s to the mid-aughts, two morons named Trey Parker and Matt Stone danced across the narrow line between stupid and offensive to find the perfect path for damn funny satire. Between South Park and Basketball and Orgasmo, they made fun of, well, everyone and everything. So it was only half surprising when they released Team America in 2004, a puppet show action movie about a team of American heroes running around and saving the world from terrorists no matter the collateral damage. Let's just run the highlights. Marionettes with intentionally janky puppeteering are still superior to Captain Ineptica at both combat and emoting. More action tropes spoofed than Hot Fuzz. Valmorphinization. Gratuitous puppet vomiting. Gratuitous puppet sex scene. The Film Actors Guild. Matt Damon. The Panthers. The Dicks, Pussies, and Assholes speech. Enough landmark demolition to give Roland Emmerich priapism. And the songs. The main theme, America Fuck Yeah, lyrically mocks all the shitty performative patriotism of post 9/11 anthems, while still managing to be a banger. I'd play a clip, but I just got listed on YouTube, and I'm not looking to get yanked by the DRM bots this soon. The sad beat reprise halfway through lands just as well. Freedom Isn't Free sends up country music and teaches us that freedom costs $1.05. The end of an act is basically 2 minutes of shitting on Michael Bay's Pearl Harbor in place of a rueful love ballad. All written and performed by Parker and Stone. Almost all of the songs are originals from them. But then in the middle of the movie, they slap in Magic Carpet Ride by Steppenwolf. Weird choice. Maybe they couldn't afford Born to be Wild? The film is slightly prescient as well, with a character traumatized by a zoo gorilla a decade and change before Harambe, and the audience traumatized by cats 15 years before furry CGI James Corden. Team America manages to make a real point about hollow Hollywood activism, zealous military fanaticism, despots, crackpots, U.S. international policy, action movies, and racism, and keep it all funny while taking shots at all sides. Some of the satire is dated after 22 years, but an unfortunate amount still seems extremely relevant. I do recommend checking it out if you can take a joke, but avoid the unrated cut unless you're into marionette fetish porn. Yeah, that seems like a good place to stop talking about this one. So what did we learn about America here? We meddle, trying to take charge of things we don't have any understanding of or business being involved in, but sometimes that's okay because an outsider with resources is needed to solve big issues. Sure, let's go with that. And we're in the final stretch. One last American movie for this binge. Something that'll be a nice, smooth tonal transition from our action comedy wave we've been riding. Let's see. Perfect. A movie starring action heroes Christian Bale, Jared Leto, Willem Dafoe. This should be fine. American Psycho, a movie from 2000 about a psychopathic yuppie in the 80s who may or may not be a serial killer with a fixation on Donald Trump. Well, shit. Okay, let me be clear from the start. I knew screening Mary Herron's adaptation of the Bret Easton Ellis novel here was going to be a bit of whiplash. Team America is bright and funny and about as subtle as a flaming bag of poop on your doorstep. And American Psycho is a nuanced cultural criticism with an unreliable narrator and a depressing message about apathy and lack of consequences among the wealthy elite. I don't think I could have found a more dissimilar pairing unless I decided to watch something by Lars von Trier. I also can't talk about this movie in the way I do others. Everything I'd usually call out as a logical inconsistency or a weird choice is probably intentional. We have an unreliable narrator in Patrick Bateman, as his mental state is the big question of the film. Quick plot rundown for those unfamiliar. Bale is Bateman, an investment banker in NYC in the 80s. He exists in a world that is so shallow and egocentric and conformist that no one can remember who anyone else is. The characters are constantly getting confused about who's who, and it's possible that Bateman is at least two other people. Batman is nuts, not just a little off, but slaughtering Jared Leto in his apartment with an axe while dancing to Huey Lewis in a raincoat nuts. He may or may not have actually done this. The movie follows John Connor as he descends deeper and deeper into madness, either killing multiple people or imagining he is, while no one around him seems to notice or care. The movie's packed with strong performances from solid actors. And also Jared Leto is there for a minute before getting axed. Samantha Mathis makes a film appearance that isn't opposite Christian Slater for a change. Reese Witherspoon is here. Chloe Sevigny dowers it up. But the real standout for me is the legendary Willem Dafoe. Dafoe plays a detective looking into the disappearance of one of Bruce Wayne's coworkers, Jared Leto's Paul Allen, who Bateman believes he's killed. Dafoe interviews him several times during the movie, and you can never pin down if he thinks the bloody banker is guilty or innocent. And this is because they shot each interview 3 times. Once with the detective suspicious, again with him convinced he's guilty, and finally with him being clueless. And then parts of each take were edited together to give an intentionally ill-fitting impression throughout each interview. It's really clever cinema. There are plenty of other places to dig into this material, but I am unprepared to deep dive enough to do it justice. If you want a detailed analysis of socio-political implications and the fallout from peak 80s corporate capitalism, you're going to need to find another podcast. I'm mostly here to make fun of things. American Psycho is heavy, and it was a rough way to end the binge. But despite the mental whiplash, we've reached the end. So what's our big takeaway? What do American movies tell us about the nation as a whole? Well, we're pretty fucked up. But at least we're allowed to make movies criticizing it. And I think that's something. On that upbeat note, I'll wrap this episode. I hope you've enjoyed this trip across American movies. And if you have any notes, comments, or thoughts on the format, memes of eagles, crap, and gold coins, send them to us at octoberfestcast@gmail.com or visit us at octoberfest.substack.com and drop a comment. Thanks for listening, and until next time, keep it Matt Damon!